I want to build a platform where somebody can almost slip and fall and land in best practices. But at the end of the day, those best practices aren't the same for everybody. And once again, these are toolboxes. It's not a rigid formula, like this is exactly the form you have to follow. But what you want is something that actually brings things together that are the best for you.
So you can see that at the right, there are a part of the code that allow to retrieve all the EC2 instance, and another part of the code that filter the EC2 instance that don't have the tag or not the right value of the tag. This Sentinel rules is only applied on Terraform code, and it's configured when you perform a plan.
We've got a lot of information on in the framework already about the different personas who are involved in a FinOps practice, and those include engineering and technical folks. Those include finance people. Those include the business or product owner people and executives and leadership. And we've been thinking through as we've been preparing for today's summit, the idea that this security persona is probably also an important one for FinOps teams to understand, to relate to, and then to provide information to.
And I'll say it again, you need to tie your security capabilities to the business value chain. Security capabilities are aligned to the business need if you do that correctly, which does allow you to effectively manage cost optimization when you implement security measures. So that's really what I think it is about. FinOps and security alignment considers all kinds of things like incident response and financial impacts, all of that.
So I think it's an interesting topic. Part of my team manages all of our security tools for the company. I also manage the FinOps team. So I was interested to see the other day in our CSPM tool that they started building in cost optimization directly into our CSPM tool. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's not as advanced as your traditional like Cloud Health or Flexera or other tools. But I mean, if you think about what they're doing, they're ingesting the same data. And so you can come to the same conclusions. So it is interesting how some of these security players are entering the FinOps space because the data is very similar as to what they're ingesting.
This month, we're going to be talking about security and governance. So we're recording this call. Over the next 120 minutes, we have a jam-packed agenda. This slide is full at size 32 font. You can expect presentations and panel conversations on security and FinOps, the intersection of that. We are welcoming our first public sector member of the FinOps Foundation. We're going to review working group outputs. And as always, at the end, we'll have breakout rooms where you can come off mute and start chatting together with your peers. Next slide, please. Now, I like to handle this code of conduct as a moment of Zen. And I'd like you all to do this with me, all right? We're going to take 2 deep breaths, okay? So get ready. Breathe in. Breathe in all those respectful and good community contributions. Hold it for a second. All right, breathe out. Breathe out those sales pitches, which are not welcome here. This is time for knowledge. Okay, one more breath, all right? Breathe in. Breathe in the kindness to your community members and treating their ideas with respect. Hold that for a second. And breathe out the legal and antitrust fine print. Keep your secrets secret, folks. We are an open source community, and we cannot talk about what's in your contract. And please do not have any anti-competitive behavior. Next slide. Because we are the FinOps Foundation. We are a 501c6 US-based nonprofit under the Linux Foundation. Our mission is advancing the people who manage the value of cloud. We do that in 3 ways: by creating connections in the community, helping inspire your career growth, and empowering community-driven best practices. Next slide, please. I want to talk about this community. It has grown so much over the last few years. We're now over 10,000 members in our community. Well over 5,000 of you have taken training and gotten certified at either the practitioner level or the professional level. And this year, we are really diving into being back to in-person events again. Earlier this year, we had a European Community Day in Amsterdam, which was so much fun. Down there in the lower left-hand corner, there was a meetup in Sydney, Australia, and roadshows, which have become one of my new favorite things. Last week, we were in Stockholm and London. Before that, I got to go to New York City and Chicago and meet so many of you in person. And the next great opportunity to meet people in person is FinOps X. And the next slide here, there is so many activities going on at FinOps X. You can completely choose your own adventure on it. I want to share a quote, something that Karen Milken said yesterday in the Women in FinOps call. Amy Ashby was presenting, sharing her story, her FinOps journey. And Karen at the end shared how she met Amy. They actually met in line for a session at AWS reInvent. And Amy said, hey, you got to get involved with the FinOps Foundation, join the community. And Karen said that she had never heard of us before. And she joined, and she was sharing this with the group yesterday. And she's like, you never know when talking FinOps with a complete and total stranger will change the trajectory of your career. And that totally registered with me because I had similar experiences back in 2017, 2018, meeting people when I was a practitioner, meeting other practitioners like Jason Fuller at Here Technologies, Mike Fuller when he was at Atlassian, Sherry Wooldridge when she was at 3M. And those connections helped fuel the energy and passion I have for this industry. And I want you all to be able to share those same sorts of experiences and connections. Dieter Metzion, who is a FinOps ambassador and well known in the community, he's frequently at conferences. He's going to be at FinOps X. He was going to join today and share how he's planning his FinOps X adventure. Unfortunately, he can't join this early in the call due to a meeting. But he's going to be hanging out in that dedicated conversation space because he's really focused in on those chance encounters, the energy driven by meeting people in person and the ideas that spark out of that. I want to have TJ, another FinOps ambassador. TJ, if you can get unmuted. And if you can share your plans on how you're planning on spending, what you're excited about FinOps X.
Absolutely. Last year when I went, it was all work, a little bit of play here and there. But this year I'm looking to take advantage of everything. I was telling Joe in the chat earlier that, it's work, fun, and fellowship, and mostly on the last two. It's really exciting like last year, I got to meet a few people I had some Zoom calls with, and this year I look forward to meeting even more people, making some new friends. Just really excited to play some of the games. I hear there's some cool games coming up as well that are scheduled. So yeah, just really looking forward to this one and seeing where it leads me. So thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, TJ. And you all should start planning out your what you're going to do. You can go on the agenda on x.finops.org and you can start saving which of those sessions you want to attend. That's there's a lot going on. The agenda keeps getting updated. We were talking at the pre-show how slides and agendas don't stop getting adjusted until it is complete, until the entire event's complete. So keep checking the agendas page on x.finops.org. And also, I want to throw out there, we understand, economic conditions. A lot of companies are cracking down and tightening their travel and conference spend. A lot of folks are self-funding. If you need help, maybe we can help. I don't know. There's no promises, but let us know what your plans are. Email events@finops.org. Let us know. Maybe we can help. Maybe we can't, but I know we can't help if you don't reach out to us. So events@finops.org. Let us know. Want to get as many of you there to get that energy and education. With that, more information on it, I'm going to pass to Ashley.
Thank you. We're really excited to announce some of these FinOps X keynotes, which again, I'm sure will evolve over time, but we do have a fireside chat by the CIO of JP Morgan. JP Morgan has been all in on FinOps. You'll learn that they are actually one of the most certified enterprise partners that we have. We also will have one of our leading practitioners from EMEA, Natalie Daly. She'll be discussing what it means to sustain a FinOps as a runner. She's been doing FinOps for at least 5-6 years at this point, and every day she says she's still challenged by something else in her role. Then we'll get to hear from the two sides of the cones as Equifax has their CFO and CIO talk about what that looks like to have a relationship together and pushing the FinOps journey ahead. Last year, we did an adopting panel that was focused on how do we get more engineers to take action. We're hearing the flip side this year, where we'll be having engineering leaders talk about what that adoption has looked like for them. And then perhaps one of the most exciting things, but I don't have biasness on this, is the VP Cloud panel. We'll have VPs of product from Oracle, Google, and Microsoft coming together and collaborating on like what this movement looks like for them, what customers are asking for them, and what they're looking forward to the next few years of FinOps bringing to their organization as well. So check out the keynotes if you haven't seen them. Again, constantly being added and updated as well. So jumping ahead, a lot of the summits and the roadshows and the meetups would not be possible without this ecosystem of partners that we have. They are at every event, they're heavily involved in our working groups, and they're always supporting the community and their different subject matter expertise. So I want to give a shout out to particularly our cloud providers, our platforms, our enterprises, and our GSIs that have constantly been contributing to the community. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce one of our partners, James Jackson, who is the head of product at Ternary. He's going to give you also another sneak peek at what they'll be presenting at FinOps X. James, you want to kick us off on the evolution of governance?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Good to see everybody. This is me. I'm James Jackson. I'm with Ternary. I've been there for about a little over a year. I won't waste too much time giving my resume or anything like that. I will say that, I'd love to see you at FinOps X. Just one disclaimer. I am, I guess, what can be charitably described as a high-functioning introvert. So, and all those little intricacies and tics that go with that. But, I do really want to talk to you. So please feel free. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the fine print. I guess I would say it's no secret that governance is a pretty big ball. And so we're just going to tug on a little thread for right now. Throughout this, just for ease of communication, I talk about these in discrete phases or versions, but really it's kind of a big continuum of things. And so that's just to make it a little bit easier to talk about. So I wouldn't put too much weight in terms of actually being different, very discrete like stages of things. Through this, we're kind of ignoring pricing negotiations. When we talk about these sort of things, yeah, that's another way to change your pricing. And certainly that's something that we do help people with, but I wouldn't do that. But talking just a little bit about usage and rate optimization, we're just going to focus a little bit just on the crawl phase with this. Once again, just drilling down just for this particular piece, but certainly I wouldn't say that this is the only thing we're talking about in terms of governance there. Next slide, please. Governance, what are we really talking about? This kind of goes back to the whole accountability thing. When most people hear accountability, they kind of groan. But a big part of it we don't want to miss is, understanding what good looks like or what done looks like for something. And then understanding, where that responsibility lies. And then, how do you actually measure, like, did you actually hit good, So some of the things that, we've certainly done over the past year, we've enhanced things like, controlling who can access certain information in terms of security. Also in terms of that workflow, like how can we help you actually manage that workflow so you don't have everybody trying to do the same thing at once, or understanding like how to look back at that. And then also, how do you actually take advantage of, what computers are good at, but, feed in what's good for you might not be good for everybody else. And so, putting some guardrails on best practices, but some of those things we've done, but just drilling in a little bit farther in terms of like where this journey kind of started and some of the phases you might look at in terms of optimization for governance. Next slide, please. So version baseline. When we first started, way back, in the dark ages of like 2017, the general natural motion was, the big thing was everybody migrating to the cloud at that point in time. And the natural motion in terms of the rules that most people played by was, it was very ad hoc in terms of the cadence, it was very stage gate. But really, you'd want to like go through a lot of usage optimization and get things pretty well stable. So make sure you weren't actually purchasing your cloud resources the same way you purchase a data center resource. And then later on, and only after that, you would do some rate optimization or coverage with things like reserved instance and savings plans and stuff like that. What you were targeting when doing these sort of things is 100% utilization, ideally for those commitments that you would purchase. Now, the good part about this is it's super efficient. Wasn't a whole lot of wasted motion and not a whole lot of wasted resource doing this. That being said, one of the big downsides is certainly a longer time to value. So we talk about moving at the speed of cloud, things change rapidly. And so anything you can do to up that cycle time decrease that cycle time would be really a good thing. So next slide, please. So moving to a lot of the things that have happened since that first iteration. Cadence. So definitely one of the things that most people have adopted, we talk about, is a regular cadence that aligns with what's the cadence of your organization. So what are your planning cycles? And that really aligning with those things just helps a lot with, we talk about putting things in front of people. If there's a cadence somebody's already used to, then certainly that helps to actually do that. So adapting to those quarterly, weekly, monthly sort of planning cycles, certainly that helps with that. Iterative cycles. So we talked about before that usage optimization happening, and then, the next stage would be this rate optimization. Actually, what more is going on and what a lot of the tools are built around is this sort of iterative thing of going along to make sure that you can take advantage of new technologies, changes in pricing, that you don't get locked in at a higher price when things are going to change. And also just the fact that your environment is changing. So with this, in addition to the things that we had above, we found we can shorten the cycle time, greater lifetime savings, and improve the general ROI of making those investments. Next slide, please. So vNext, on the right is a little graphic. I don't know if folks have seen it. It's called an OODA loop. It's developed by a fighter pilot. And the general idea is, things happening, when you're facing an adversary is there are 4 things you have to do. You have to observe your environment. You have to orient yourself to it. You have to make a decision about what to do, and then you have to actually act on that decision. That being said, the other person's trying to do this too. And whoever can do this the fastest forces the other person to start all over again, and they never actually get to the point of acting. Well, we're talking about, optimization and governance. The real adversary is just kind of the environment. There's not somebody else trying to kill you. At least I don't think so anyway. But what's actually happening is things are changing so quickly. Anything you can do to up that cycle time is better. So you're not always trying to constantly observe and decide. You actually get to the point where you can act and then measure based on those actions. And so to do that, we're taking advantage more, pattern recognition, learning algorithms, things that computers do very well to actually inject those. And so setting the thresholds in some of the other phases, like people talk about like the 80-20 rule in terms of, I don't want to do anything that isn't utilized 80% of the time or doesn't save me at least 20%. That's probably a good benchmark and will work for most folks, but, you want to customize that for you. But, it's always been kind of an ad hoc sort of guesswork sort of thing, and allow a computer to actually help you set those guidelines. In addition, with that, you can actually make your cadence really, you only need to be bothered with this like once something happens that you need to know about. And the computer's really good at actually identifying those things and showing you those things when you need to know them. And so these are some of the things that are really guiding us on our development framework. But with this, we can, as I mentioned, we can actually accelerate that cycle time. You can make it highly customizable so that what's best practices for somebody else might not be best practice for you, but how do you determine that? And so a computer is actually very good at doing that sort of thing, and just pulling out that guesswork. So go on to the next slide, please. So kind of some of the takeaways. Earlier, as I mentioned before, these are presented in stages, but they're really not. Early is not necessarily obsolete. It's all about accelerating your time to value, getting to a customized solution over just a standard best practice. I've been one of the ones that's championed all the time that I want to build a platform where somebody can almost slip and fall and land in best practices. But at the end of the day, those best practices aren't the same for everybody. And once again, these are toolboxes. It's not a rigid formula, like this is exactly the form you have to follow. But what you want is something that actually brings things together to the best for you. And then most of all, the evolution continues. What's perfect today won't be perfect tomorrow, and it's going to continue to evolve. And so things will keep changing, and those tools that help you evolve are always good. All right, well, thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. Please come and join us at the FinOps X at our breakout session or at our booth. We'd love to talk to you.
Thanks, James. I'm really excited to dive a lot deeper in this. All right, Courtney, you want to give us an overview of this risky business you're going to be talking about at X?
Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Courtney Bormann, and I'm excited to be joining all of you at X. with a talk on risky business, implementing cloud governance to drive business value. And I will be joined by my great colleague, Josh Moe, who is our lead cloud architect. So he'll be adding a great flavor as well to this presentation. As we flip forward here and take a look at the first slide that I've included, it really highlights cloud policy and governance. And as I think a lot of you know, right, this is a capability and a domain, right, that impacts everything else that we do across our FinOps practice. And it gives us really that mechanism to orchestrate and direct. I love that quote from the FinOps org. So what I want to give you a little teaser about here is on the next slide that we're going to look at and where we're going to spend most of our time. So we'll of course set up, with a little bit about governance, about General Mills, but when you come to this talk, we're going to be spending 3/4 of our time really talking about the how and how this gets implemented and seeing it in action and providing you with those examples. You got to show up for the talk to see that. I didn't include those slides in this little 2-minute teaser, so I hope to see you all there. But we're going to be talking through, the cost of not implementing and some examples around that. How do we keep it lightweight but effective? And how do we have a framework, right, that really can help guide decisions on the benefits of governance and balancing those against, all of the time and the resources that you need to invest and making sure that it's really the right thing for your organization and for your FinOps practice. And we're going to bring this to life in a few different ways, in ways where we've been incredibly successful. So things like, governance around CUDs or RI implementation. We're going to be talking you through our model of automation and how we think about governance around project creation and tagging, right? That ever important layer to make sure we've got all the data we need to do the other analysis that comes on top of it. And then we're going to talk through some governance around slots. And that's an area, to be candid with you, where it hasn't worked great for our organization. And we made the decision not to implement. So we'll go deeper into that. And with a little luck, I'll be trying to be persuasive with my colleague Josh and get him dressing up here like Tom Cruise in Risky Business for the presentation. So I hope to see you all there. I promise that it's going to be the most fun you're going to have talking about governance all summit. So please join me and hope to see a lot of folks out in San Diego soon.
That's amazing. And knowing what Josh looks like, I think he could pull that off really well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Totally.
It's going to be a Tom Cruise fest out in San Diego. Thank you, James, and thank you, Courtney. It's good to see both of you who I've enjoyed working with in the past. Courtney is also, I would point out, one of our FinOps certified professional folks, so has gone through that program, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that program if you have any. I wanted to just jump in. I'm Rob from the foundation. I wanted to just jump in quickly and talk a little bit about cloud policy and governance. Courtney alluded to this, but if you go to the next slide, the one of the capabilities in the FinOps framework is in fact cloud policy and governance, and it really covers all of those aspects that Courtney is going to talk about in her talk. But it's the what we want to happen. That's our policy, and how we make it happen. That is our governance. So I will encourage you to kind of go out to the FinOps.org website and take a look at the framework there, and take a look at that capability. This is something that we cover in a lot of the training courses that we do in the FinOps Certified Practitioner and in the FinOps Certified Professional, where we go into how do we protect the organization using governance, align the cloud-related activities with our strategy, and control the use of what cloud resources we want to do, and support the kind of overall value creation that we're trying to do. And that involves necessarily that balance that Courtney talked about between what we have to do to protect ourselves and what we want to do to really drive value for our organization. We're going to have a couple of discussions then today about how governance can support us, and particularly how governance works with security which is where kind of the domain where we hear most about governance coming in. And so I wanted to introduce for our next section, Alexandre and John from, Alexandre is one of our professionals as well. And John, as we heard at the beginning, has just become our probably latest FinOps certified practitioner. So congratulations on that. And they're going to be talking about how SecOps and FinOps can work together to create a better cloud governance program. So Alexandre and John, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandre PARÈS. So I'm with my ex-colleague Jean. And together, we will present you one of our previous experience to highlight how SecOps and FinOps work together for better cloud governance. So,
hi, everyone. I'm Jean Verron, a cloud security engineer.
So for this talk, we are both working for Sunbird. So it's a multinational enterprise that is migrating application to the cloud using infrastructure as code. Sunbird has many products. So they have SunCube, a business-to-business application. They have another application, BlueSun, that is currently running in a development account. And we have with us Bob, that is the project owner and is ready to request a production environment for this application. So we will see how a product are released in the next slide at Sunbird. So at Sunbird, when a product owner is ready to release his application, he can request a production account. When this request is received by the central IT team, the project is then onboarded. Then guardrails are defined. And finally, the production account is delivered. During all these steps, monitoring is performed to provide both FinOps and SecOps alertings. Next slide, please.
We will see in the next few slides how Bob is onboarding as a project owner at Sunbird to be aligned with both SecOps and FinOps best practice and requirement. Then I will explain how we enforce at Sunbird control using policy such as cloud and EAC policy. And finally, we will see how monitoring is set up to detect misconfiguration to provide alert to Bob in his cloud journey.
So as a project owner, Bob will be onboarded with both FinOps and SecOps team. Before their production account is provided, the project will have to go through approvals. Having this review guarantee homogeneous governance across the entire application landscape at Sunbird. Next slide, please.
So onboarding at Sunbird is divided in three main parts. So first you have the security review and the FinOps review that will be explained by Alexandre and architecture review. These three parts can be done at the same time. And for the security review, so if we deep dive a little bit, so we have first of all the security service review. We will go service by service to see if the configuration of the service is compliant regarding our internal security policy. After, we will go a little bit higher with the security architect review. So we will see if the architecture of the application is well-defined and be compliant with our internal policy also and the regulation. After, we will onboard Paul on our security tool, and we will adapt the security level to the project, depending on the regulation and the data that the project have.
Just go back for the, yes. So in the FinOps review, we want Bob to understand why FinOps is important and how it's applied at Sunbird. Then we will revise budgets provided by Bob with actuals and forecast from his development account and also additional insight he may have for the production account. After that, we will go through asset review to check recommendation. Then we will review also accounts metadata and check all of that for the cost allocation capabilities. Finally, we will check with Bob if his project needs quotas and limits update. And as you can see, there are many personas involved in these reviews. So a clear onboarding process will quickly provide compliant accounts without blocking the business to provide these accounts. Next slide, please.
So after see how a project is onboarded at Sunbird, we will see how guardrail is put at Sunbird. So first of all, you need to think as Bob. Bob is a project owner, can have a scope change and may not want to respect our guidelines. So we need to have a way to make sure that Bob will respect our security and FinOps guideline. To do so, we will enforce some policies such as cloud and EAC policy. Can you switch to the next slide? So, and how this policy works. So you have mainly two types of policy, as I said previously, EAC policy and cloud policy. For the EAC policy, this policy will be applied on your CI/CD pipeline, and they will block the user to push from your CD pipeline to the cloud environment. For example, for EAC policy, you have Sentinel or OPA. And for the cloud policy, so it's a stronger policy than the EAC. For the cloud policy, it's mainly such as SCP on AWS or policy on GCP or other policy like that in other cloud provider. It will be applied on your cloud provider and it will block the user at the API level. So it's a stronger way to enforce some best practice. Can you switch?
So why does it matter? First, FinOps policy can help us limit the blast radius by enforcing quotas on limits. So an example could be the amount of requests a user can have on a specific database services. Secondly, policy can help us promote best practices, for example, to use latest generation instances. And finally, they will help us enable other FinOps capabilities, such as the cost allocation one, by enforcing specific tags on accounts.
For the security purpose, so policy will do the same job. First, SecOps policy can help us to limit blast radius by enforcing configuration of service and prevent misconfiguration. For example, you can block user to deploy and create API key. You can block user to have a non-compliant EMS DV2 instances in AWS. And secondly, policy will help us to promote security best practice, such as blocking some specific permission to enforce one step further the least privilege, for example. And finally, the policy will enable us to ensure a uniform level of security through the company by, for example, applying your internal encryption policy in all applications. Next slide. So, what is inside the EAC policy? Now, let's see what is inside and how it works. So, as said before, we will first deep dive on the EAC policy, and after I will go to the cloud policy. There are two main types of EAC policy. You have Sentinel and OPA. Each role will have a name, a description, a query only for OPA, and an enforcement level to either block or warn the user. And finally, the code that you can see an example of a code Sentinel at the right. The Sentinel guarantees that the EC2 instances have the right tag for the scheduler instance. So you can see that at the right, there are a part of the code that allow to retrieve all the EC2 instance, and another part of the code that filter the EC2 instance that don't have the tag or not the right value of the tag. This Sentinel rules is only applied on Terraform code, and it's configured when you perform a plan. But you need to be careful because for Sentinel, it can only be applied in the case of Terraform Enterprise or Cloud. If you're using Terraform open source, you need to go through OPE because Terraform Sentinel is not available on Terraform open source. Now that we have seen how EAC work and what is inside, we will see what is a cloud policy. Can you switch? So CSP policy or cloud policy, it's, for example, on AWS, it's called SCP policy. On GCP, it's called organization policy. They will allow us to filter and block API call made by certain user or service accounts, such as, for example, as I said, SCP. At the right, you can see that this it's an SCP, and this SCP will ensure that no user can deploy, for example, a G2 instance, but you can change the type of instances, even if they are admin. So we can block with this admin action. These rules are normally used by security practice to block certain API code, but can be applied in the case of FinOps, as the final risk is also a security risk. Now that we have seen all the enforcement rules, we will see how to set up alerting and monitoring.
Next slide, please. So project is now onboarded and running in the cloud with best practices from both FinOps and SecOps practices. To improve our visibility, we have deployed monitoring tools from both practices. So let's see in the next slide what we are talking about. So in our business case, Sunbird has started the implementation of FinOps after adopting SecOps practice. With that context, we want to leverage existing tools for our FinOps practice, and existing SecOps tools can provide a wide range of features that is described in the left side of this slide. Many features can be useful for the FinOps practice, such as service configuration, global overview, and even rule-based alerts. But FinOps can provide monitoring and alerts also based on budget management, dedicated FinOps dashboards, and service recommendation. For these features, we can't rely on SecOps tools, and we need dedicated FinOps tools. These tools can be either native, third-party, or internal. And it's still relevant to benchmark both SecOps and FinOps tools for features that can be provided by both tools. Some of these tools provide a full range of monitoring for both FinOps and SecOps practice. Next slide, please.
Now, Bob has been trained on the tool and knows the best practice on both FinOps and SecOps. He's aware of guardrails and monitoring in place at Sunbird. Bob is now an autonomous tenant owner.
Next slide, please. So as main takeaways for our business case, we have the first and most important one: teams need to collaborate. As you have seen, there are many personas involved in the Bob journey. Secondly, we have the leverage SecOps and FinOps on SecOps tools and processes. FinOps adoption can be eased using SecOps tools and processes, increasing agility on both disciplines. Then we have continuously review and update your tools. This is a good one because FinOps adoption can improve over time, and this is the same case on the SecOps part, as well as tools evolve also over time. Then use existing unified tools. As both SecOps and FinOps tools can be used for both practice, you have an example with CSPM tools that can tackle this. Enforce policy, increase your coverage by enforcing policy on both, on one side, the CI/CD pipeline, and on the other side, the cloud environment that can be done, as Jean described, using both cloud and IAC policies. Then you have automate policy, use policy as code to trace, document, and revert change if you need it. And finally, set up a strong exception processes. This is really an important one, as the more rule you have deployed, the more exception you have to handle. Next slide, please. So based on our Sunbird use case, we may want to add some new feature to our backlog, such as implementing cost estimation on security scanner in the CI/CD pipeline to provide engineers with better insight. Then we could publish a cloud policy FinOps framework that will expose policy with documentation, enforcement timelines to end users. And finally, integrate project onboarding with self-service cloud portal. This is a great way to provide product owner with the right tools. And for example, they can leverage self-assessment for FinOps and SecOps practices. So that's close our use case. So next slide, please. So a big thank you. I hope you have found our use case helpful, and we remain available at the end of this summit for your questions.
Thank you both. I know there's a lot of questions that were coming in, and so we will be taking those questions in the breakout sessions and copying them over. So feel free to still drop some and join that. All right, so I do want to jump in and just give you guys to introduce our TAC. We recognize them each summit that we do. This is our technical governing board body. They are really the subject matter experts from across industries, Target, Spotify, government agencies. I do want to congratulate Laura from the GSA, who has recently been nominated by the governing board to join the TAC. We're also in the middle of our spring election, so we will have 3 more community members joining in the next few weeks. This is really important because as the TAC made a critical decision to scale themselves, so we can continue to unlock opening up more working group opportunities. I know that's a common ask we get. I wanted to get in more working groups. I wanted them to be in different time zones. And so the TAC is working on expanding so they can adapt to that capacity that we need. Recently, the TAC of the last few months have been reviewing our partner certification program. We have revised that criteria and created a new rubric. We now have certifications for platform services. We recently renamed solution to specialty solution. We're also introducing a brand new certification for enterprises. All those details are updated now on our partner page. I do want to call out they are working on a queue because we did pause these for a couple of months. So if you have any questions or want to get your organization applying for these, you can reach out to partner-cert@finops.org. Just kind of be patient with us as we're getting through the process now that TAC's approved those new criteria. Next, I want to shift over and introduce one of our community partners. We have Elizabeth joining us as the Chief Information Officer from Loudoun County. They are on their initial journey of their cloud adoption. And what I love about them is they've been thinking about FinOps from day one. I think Rob told me they've been having these conversations when they're spending less than $10 a month in the cloud. So
yes,
very exciting to see.
That's very true. Yeah. So we are in the beginning of our FinOps practice. I did like the tools about SecOps, to talk about tools for SecOps to FinOps, because we are using capabilities such as Prisma and Cloud Health. So we do have a hybrid cloud environment, and we are using FinOps like through Cloud Health, which does help us track costs and contribute to an effective risk management and compliance with governance standards. So FinOps has really allowed us to streamline our financial process while we're leveraging the technology automation. It does allow us to foster collaboration between our finance team, our engineering team, and our security and other business functions. It does support governance, in our view, from providing us accurate and timely financial information. And it does enable us decision makers to assess our financial health and tie our financial commitments to the business value chain that the cloud can provide. So what it really does give us is a balanced approach to both cost and risk management in our organization, because it does help us obviously balance cost and risk management together. It's very crucial to identify risk and the protection impact on the organization while evaluate the cost of mitigating those risks. And that allows us to address the FinOps protection methods that they have. And this approach allows us to have decision-making that does consider both cost and risk management, which in the end does, for us, allow FinOps to succeed so that we can deploy the benefits of the cloud while we manage the cost. That does allows us to successfully execute the critical task that does allow us to map technology capabilities to the business value chain. Because in the end, I really do think that FinOps is a function of governance that does tie cloud adventures to the business, which is in the end what I think the key value of FinOps.
Elizabeth and John will be joining our special interest group around government and the public sector. And they have quite a few plans. They have spinning up many working groups to work on this, not just within their organization, but helping other government agencies adapt quickly as well. Speaking of governing, let's pivot to governing board. We also have many of these members that will be attending FinOps X, and a lot of them are going to be speaking. Our governing board helps us drive our strategic and innovation around our foundation. We're constantly asking them what's next, what's the future of FinOps, and getting their perspectives that they're seeing within within the cloud providers, the vendors, the consultancies, the trends that they're seeing in fintech and retail and technology. And recently, Melvin Brown was represented to represent the U.S. government on the governing board and start bringing more of that perspective as we look at driving our strategy the next 18 months forward. Do you want to go ahead and introduce Melvin Brown II? He is the Deputy Chief Information Officer of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. He is also co-leading that government special interest group. Melvin, you want to give us a little teaser of your talk at X?
Yeah, no, thank you. Excited about being here, and thank you to the FinOps Foundation for the honor of joining such a prestigious group of people and thought leaders around where we're going in FinOps and how it's It's going to rechange the landscape of how we do cloud in the government. When a federal department or agency wants to employ technology, you would think that we would have a cookie cutter approach, especially with all the bureaucracy that we have to get through. And so when you want to launch a cloud in the government, you ask yourself, how hard could it be? Well, it can be extremely hard. And so one of the things that we did at OPM is we took the innovation of using cloud technology as a part of our modernization. We've got a 2-year sprint to the cloud where we want to get everything in the cloud in the next 2 years. And we started that practice in about 2021. And so we adopted FinOps a little early, and it has become the method for us to be able to bring people across multiple disciplines together in a way that wouldn't normally happen in government. I'm excited about where we're going. We're having conversations that we wouldn't have. We've been virtual through the COVID environment, and FinOps has been the foundation that has linked us together. And so I want to talk about what are some of those nuances and some of those new things that we have done to reshape our government and maximize the taxpayer dollars. So looking forward to seeing you there. I will promise you, I'm not going to be in a bow tie in California while we're there. So if you're looking, I'm not wearing a bow tie. So the best you're going to get is this photo on this slide, but excited about it and really, really, really appreciate the honor of working with all of you to help us improve and maximize and optimize the government and the taxpayer dollars. So thank you for all you do. Rob, guys, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bormann. Yes, it's very seldom that we hear from speakers whose work in FinOps benefits all of us citizens in a particular country. So thank you for what you're doing, Melvin, as well. If we go to the next slide, the next section that I wanted to bring to you is a much more direct discussion about how do security and FinOps work together in an organization. As a guy who used to do security assessments for the government, it's always been sort of a nice, it seems like a nice partnership that we can make between the IT security groups that are running in organizations and the FinOps groups who are trying to control that. On the next slide, we see the FinOps Framework slide that I talked about earlier, and the intersection between IT security, like the intersection to ITAM or the intersection to TBM or other intersecting frameworks, is covered by that down at the bottom right corner there, that capability called FinOps and intersecting frameworks. So again, this is good information that we have available to you as open source on our website that talks about how FinOps practices interrelate with these other frameworks and other groups that are probably working in your organization as well. And the role of cloud policy and governance and cloud security, IT security, are very, very closely related, as we heard from John and Alexandre. If we go to the next slide, we've got a lot of information in the framework already about the different personas who are involved in a FinOps practice, and those include engineering and technical folks, those include finance people, those include the business or product owner people and executives and leadership. And we've been thinking through, as we've been preparing for today's summit, the idea that this security persona is probably also an important one for FinOps teams to understand, to relate to, and then to provide information to. It's clear that a lot of the data that FinOps teams manage and provide to the organization can also be used really well by the security folks who are protecting our infrastructure and our companies as a whole. In searching through who's doing security in the community right now, we've looked at the practitioners that we have, and we've only found 59 people of the 10,000 or so who are members who have security in their title. But of course, as we all know, and as our security folks will tell us in a second, security is everybody's job. As we used to say at AWS, security is job zero. FinOps maybe, as Merritt Hughes has said, job 0.5, but security is really the responsibility of everyone to make sure that we keep ourselves together. And so in putting together this persona, we've laid out some of the kind of objectives, frustrations, metrics, and benefits that a security person might be interested in. And we'll look forward to sort of advancing this as we go forward a little bit more. We can go to the next slide, Ashley. Not surprisingly, the 2023 State of Security survey says 95% of security budgets will increase over the next 2 years. That's kind of in keeping with cloud. 56% of those were reporting that they expected significant increases in spending and budgets for security over the time. I think the strategic focus of a lot of organizations has shifted to protecting and really making security a high priority in the cloud as they shift environments and shift where value is being delivered. And so given this increase and given the amount of spending that many organizations do in security, we wanted to convene a little panel of people who can come together and talk about this a little bit together. So we're happy to welcome back Sean and Alexandre to this panel, but I would also like to introduce a few others. Elizabeth from Loudoun County, who is the Chief Information Security Officer there. Meredith Stickle from who is the Senior Director in Infrastructure and Information Security Enablement, and Jason Smallwood, who is an Enterprise Cloud Architect and has worked in security as well. So welcome to all of you. Yes, I'm seeing in the comments, Green Dev Sec FinOps is going to be trending for a while. So all of you have a bit of a background in information security or IT security. I guess, Elizabeth, let me start with you. How do you see FinOps and security aligned today in your organization? And others can jump in on that as well.
So I think, honestly, the trick is to align FinOps and security through security investments. And I'll say it again, you need to tie your security capabilities to the business value chain. You know, security capabilities are aligned to the business need if you do that correctly, which does allow you to effectively manage cost optimization when you implement security measures. So that's really what I think it is about. FinOps and security alignment considers all kinds of things like incident response and financial impacts, all of that. If there's a security event or breach, we must be prepared to understand the financial impact while also managing the response. And that is what FinOps is all about.
Yeah. Is that a similar, any of you others have a similar take on that or seeing that in your organizations?
Meredith, you're on mute if you're talking. I see your lips moving.
Okay, good. I just got unmuted there. Thank you. Okay. Very similar at our organization at McAfee. We've aligned FinOps and security mainly through some of the governance boards that we have to make sure that we are all streamlined and aligned on how we are managing public cloud from a cost perspective and from a security perspective, because they go hand in hand. I mean, you can talk about lifecycle management in cloud, which shutting down instances, reducing your attack surface, that's good for security, and it's good for your spend, right? And reducing your costs. So we've done the alignment largely through our governance forums.
Right, and I think that FinOps is a function of governance, so that totally makes sense to me, Meredith.
Yeah. Is that I guess, Meredith, to build on that, how important is how do you balance that, the managing cost versus the managing risk? I mean, that's IT security, I guess, is mostly about controlling risk for the organization, but how do you balance that with the need or the desire to go faster and innovate and, get out in the marketplace more quickly?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, as a security company, security and managing risk is always a top priority, but it's a balancing act, right? You've got to make sure you're maintaining your financial targets and your budget. So some of the ways that we do this balancing act is definitely driven from FinOps. If we can find a place where we can optimize on spend, just as an example, we looked at our cloud architecture and saw that we were over provisioned on our native firewalls that we were using. And so we took an architecture initiative to reevaluate and to figure out how can we save on cost and maintain the same level of security. And we were able to do that with a significant savings. And with that savings, we give some back to the central bucket, but we put some towards enhancing some of our other security initiatives that we needed to drive, whether that was enabling, and we're primarily AWS, enabling more guard duty functionality or enhancing our EDR. But when you can show, hey, we've saved the X amount, you can put a certain amount towards security. And that's where our CCOE comes into play, because we make those decisions there with our finance partners and our cross-functional BU stakeholders.
Okay, so you're doing sort of that similar kind of review of each project as they come through with the multifunctional group.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, because you can't just enable more security, you can't just keep purchasing more security, right? You've got to balance it. You've got to save somewhere to put it elsewhere.
Right. You've got to absolutely tie it to the business need. I keep saying that. You've got to map capabilities to what you're doing.
Gotcha. Jason, let me invite you in. Can you give us an example of cloud governance management automation that's sort of aligned with security that's also helping FinOps that you've seen?
So a couple different ones that I've seen were removing public endpoints when they weren't in use, either decommissioning the resources or destroying the resources. Also isolating workloads when there's an anomaly in usage or there's a security attack. That can help lower consumption based on how the resource is built.
Yeah, I think Alexandre and John, in your talk, you talked about the blast radius idea there, and I guess that would go to sort of controlling that.
Yes, you can control the blast radius by enforcing some automation. For example, as Jason said, you can enforce in some functions that will isolate some instances, but you can also make some other automatization through the tools that you use. For example, in security, we use CSPM tools. And in these tools is also some automation in terms of security that can be applied on FinOps side. For example, tagging. For example, if as Jason said, if an instance go, I would say crazy, so will consume all the CPU, you can so automatically shut down the instance or reduce so the CPU size to make sure that they will not spend all your budget just on one instances.
Yeah,
we've done automations in the past at an organization I was with, where when attacks or anomalies started to occur, we would shut traffic off to that resource.
And you're doing that based on detection of the anomaly, or based on violation of budgets, or how are you doing that mechanism-wise?
It would be that was based on security anomalies.
Okay.
For the most part, but you could also do that off of usage as well.
Yeah, anomaly detection has always seemed to me to be the clearest capability, that where there's a direct tie between the CISO's organization and the FinOps organization, because there've been lots of stories where the cost anomaly was the first thing that happened that was noticed before an actual break-in or breach was noticed as well. There were a lot of I'm kind of going off script here, but there were a lot of questions in the chat during the governance presentation about tools. I know that tools, the security teams are kind of famous for having a variety of tools to get defense in depth, to be able to see, have different vectors of looking at the data and looking at how we do things. Is there do you all see a combining of those, or the FinOps teams and security teams using kind of the same set of tools, or the same kind of data lakes full of information to do their jobs more effectively, or where do you see the tool environment going?
So I think it's an interesting topic. Part of my team manages all of our security tools for the company. I also manage the FinOps team. So I was interested to see the other day in our CSPM tool that they started building in cost optimization directly into our CSPM tool. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's not as advanced as your traditional like Cloud Health or FlexAir or other tools. But I mean, if you think about what they're doing, they're ingesting the same data. And so you can come to the same conclusions. So it is interesting how some of these security players are entering the FinOps space, because the data is very similar as to what they're ingesting.
We're seeing more in that too, where the tools are combining and adding those new features. So probably not surprising that the security tools are heading in that same direction. Alexandre, we've heard stories of sort of anomaly alerts detecting non-compliance or security breaches. Are there any examples of those that you could talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had in your previous experience an anomaly from SAP workloads, and that trigger a cost anomaly. So it was a FinOps tool that detect the anomaly. It was a native from the cloud service provider tool. And to understand what was behind that, we send, as usual, the anomaly to the product owner. So this part of the triage. So it's the product owner that does the triage because he knows what is running. And on that, they'll come back to us and ask us to provide them with more insight. On the FinOps part, we weren't really able to do that. So we rely on also SecOps tools. For example, there was one with one that analyzes the flow log between VPC. And that was really helpful to deep dive from what instances the anomaly came from. And on that, they deep dive and understand that was, in the end, an agent that was triggering all that data outside this instance. But yes, so part of the anomaly triage, it will be on the FinOps side, we push the anomaly to the tenant, the product owner, and it's their responsibility to understand what costs are based on their workload, and also to respond all on the security side. So it's basically to delegate the responsibility to the product owner that we manage to do this kind of triage. And also because in your previous experience, John and I were under the same team, it is a lot to communicate between the FinOps part and the security part because we are under the same team.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a best practice from all of you, that your ITAM or your FinOps teams and your IT security teams are working very closely together. And I guess that would be much harder in an organization where they're not, where they're more siloed and more separated. So first principle of FinOps, collaboration is important, right? I guess I wanted to get so all of you are in some way related to IT security. I wanted to just ask kind of a question to everybody on the panel, and that is, as IT security folks, what would be your, we have a lot of FinOps folks on the call today, what would be your ask to FinOps teams, like just thinking strictly from an IT security perspective, what would be your ask from FinOps teams to help you do your job, help you do the security function more quick, better, that sort of thing? I don't know who wants to start. Elizabeth, maybe you can start us off.
I think you're on mute, Elizabeth.
Yeah, okay, thank you. There I am. Thank you, Rob. I would say FinOps can help us by understanding the break glass kind of moments that we might have in security. How do you keep costs for that down? If you do have a break glass moment, how would that tie into FinOps principles? But again, I go back to tying it to the business need. If you have your break glass scenarios mapped already in practice, it shouldn't be that hard, but you never really know, right? So I would just considering more scenarios like that.
Gotcha.
And just leveraging your comments, Elizabeth, about tying it back to the business. And that's really my call to action also is on the cloud governance forums. As a FinOps professional, if you're haven't started taking lead on a FinOps board or equivalent to work with your business unit partners and how they can optimize costs, track that spend, I think you absolutely should, because then that also helps out the InfoSec and IT teams as well on what those savings might be. So that would be my call to action is on the cloud governance, aligning with your business stakeholders and meeting on a regular frequency.
Yeah, collaboration. I agree.
Jason or Alexander or Sean, you want to jump in?
So yeah, that's a line. So basically, both of the practice need to collaborate. We cover in our talk, for example, the onboarding part when we onboard a product owner to the cloud. So it's a good way to see what the cloud security is doing, and also for the security part to see how FinOps is doing also at the enterprise. So it's a good way to find ways to collaborate together on the business side.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a couple of questions that came in from the chat that I'll, if you're game, I'll just throw out here. One of you mentioned, or several of you mentioned tagging earlier. One of the questions was how can our tagging and account separation strategies, hierarchy strategies, help with both FinOps and InfoSec? Any examples of how those tie together?
One example I can think of is tagging resources with the exceptions. So if you track exceptions for, say, a CIS control, when those recommendations come up from the different platforms, that's less recommendations that your teams will have to sift through and review.
Interesting. So okay, so if a particular resource is non-compliant, you know it's non-compliant, then you don't have to investigate it every time. Because
correct.
For time saving, yeah, great.
Yeah, and just to add to that from a security angle, so we're building out our tagging policy, but we have mandatory security tags for patch management. So for our Elastic workloads, we've tagged them as cattle. If they are up longer than a predefined amount of time, we can shut them down, which is good from a cost perspective. It's good from a security perspective. So that's just one angle that we have today with tagging.
Yeah, that's a great one too. Yeah, it's important to note tagging is used for all kinds of things, operations and security and everything, including FinOps. So even when you have cost allocation tags, sometimes they're useful. It's also one of the things we recommend in the intersecting frameworks capability is, make friends with these different organizations and steal their stuff. Oftentimes, the security team already has a good taxonomy for identifying and categorizing things in the infrastructure. So it's easier to use those same terms and to maybe steal existing tags than to go and force tags on other people as well. I had another question about an example of cloud cost management activities that were advocated by FinOps that have also helped security. So I think we talked about tagging, we talked about discounts, but any other things that the FinOps team is doing or that are FinOps activities that have helped you in security shops?
Going back to my initial comment about the lifecycle management and the cleanup of the environment, I think it's FinOps related, it's cost savings, but it's beneficial for security from the attack surface perspective and reducing that surface.
Yeah, I agree with that. You just have to map your tools to the capability, and that's how you definitely reduce your attack surface.
Snoozing VMs. That reduces the attack surface as well, and some consumption.
Yes.
Although I will add to that, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We wanted individuals to use the spot instances or only have their instances turned on at a certain time or shut them off during the weekend. Well, we do a lot of patching activities over the weekend. So if the instances are shut off for a FinOps perspective, that can negatively affect our patch management activities. So it's interesting how you navigate both of those.
That's interesting. Is that so? When you're managing the process, I guess if you're using you have your resources being treated like like cattle, not like pets, as the old saying goes, or like carrots, not like bonsais. If you're a vegetarian, then you're kind of updating your images, right? Are you updating a lot of the image source? Then the new resources that get spawned after that, or they could turn back up after that, are compliant coming up?
Yeah, it's a bigger issue with the pets, right? The cattle, you're pulling the latest images, so that's okay, but it's the pets, the ones that are long standing, or whatever the vegetarian term was that I probably should start using. But it's the pets, the ones that they're just shutting down over the weekend to realize the cost savings that we're running in, that we've recently run into the issue of why aren't these getting patched? Oh, good job saving on cost, but
right.
Let's figure out a new schedule for when we can get them patched.
Right. So then you would have to adapt your patching schedule to the cost.
Yeah, exactly.
Or introduce the automation to sort of rehydrate those so that they can be patched. There was a specific question here as well, and I don't know whether anybody wants to take this, but how do we build security governance around third-party licenses used for containers or for edge devices? Has anybody tackled that challenge? I know container scanning and container there's not a lot of STIGs or security images for container images yet.
Yeah, we just treat it as our standard vuln management process with the container scans. Like the VM tool that we have runs the container scans as well. So it's just part of that process.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, containers are complex in a bunch of different ways, but that's, I guess, security isn't just another one where they are. Okay. Any last questions or comments from anybody? I really appreciate all of you being here to talk to us about how security and FinOps relate to one another. I don't see any other big questions in the chat. We will be staying in the panel will be staying in the main channel after the session today. So if you've got questions, anybody watching has got questions for the panel, please stick around afterwards, and we'll be able to hear from them. So thank you all very much. I did want to, on the next slide, thank you. I did want to talk about the FinOps and security next steps. There's as I said in the preamble here, we've taken a shot at starting a security persona. And there are probably other security related playbooks that some of the folks on the panel talked about, with tagging and account security, anomaly detection, and so on. So if you are interested in this topic, in InfoSec in general, and the intersection between FinOps and InfoSec, please join that conversation at the Chat InfoSec channel on Slack, or join or put forward your thoughts about a security working group, because we would love to have this continue and really kind of flesh out the intersection between security and FinOps more fully. So with thanks to the panel, I've got, I think, one more slide before I turn it over, and that is my long-awaited announcement that Tom Cross, the FinOps board game, is now available for sale. And this has been a long and tortuous process getting to this point, but I appreciate all the patience of everyone who I've teased along the way. FinOps, the board game, is a collaborative cloud value strategy game. Here's some people enjoying it at our recent New York meetup. And it's about building value in your cloud before your budget runs out. So if your team is a gaming or gaming fans, this is a great way to bring them together and learn a little bit more about FinOps. It does teach you a lot about the personas. You play together collaboratively as a bunch of different personas. Finance personas and engineering personas and FinOps professionals and so on. So you work together to move a bunch of applications to the cloud while building out your FinOps framework and capabilities at the same time. It's designed to be not only a learning game but a strategy game, so you can play it multiple times. If you've ever played Pandemic, there was a little bit of inspiration taken from that. It is available from GameCrafter. Go to finops.org/game. That's the place where you can find the links. There's also a video there that shows you how to play, how to set it up, and has links to buy it there. So we will have this at FinOps X. I will be playing it on the first full night on the 28th, I guess, at 7:30. So find me if you're interested in playing the game at FinOps X. We'll have a few copies there as well for people to play, and we've got some fancy deluxe versions for that as well. So any questions on that, shoot to me, but I'll pass it back over to Sam.
Thanks, Rob. That is certainly exciting news. Great thing for teams to do together. And speaking of teams, we have groups of our teams of our community members to get together to form working groups to produce valuable content for the broader community, tackling various FinOps challenges. And as of right now, we have about 10 active working groups with many, many more who have completed outputs. They're all on our website. But we do have 2 working groups. The proposal pending phase, data workflows kicked off earlier this month, and KPIs is the next working group, which will start June 1st. And then the plans for this group is to create a catalog of KPIs and then tie each of those KPIs back to each of the FinOps capabilities, and then provide instructional guidance on how to create and calculate those KPI metrics through the production of various KPI playbooks. And if you're interested in this working group, we'd love to have you join. Again, it starts June 1st. I think we're going to be dropping a link in the chat channel here that you can use to request to join this working group. I certainly consider getting involved. If you're interested in participating, you can go to our community events page to see which working groups meet and when. But additionally, our working group overview page displays a list of all of the working groups and gives you a place to submit ideas for new working groups, as well as to request to join those working group meetings. But if you have any questions regarding working groups, feel free to reach out to me directly via Slack or email. I'm always happy to answer your question. But today for Summit, we have representatives from 3 different working groups going to share progress with you. And up first is Amy from the ITAM Internships working group.
Hey, y'all. So I'm here to talk about the ITAM and FinOps intersecting working group. And we recently completed our first sprint. So what I'll talk about today is what we did in that first sprint and what our outputs were. We had really 2 objectives this sprint, which was to really, I'll start from the bottom, to first develop a ITAM persona, to introduce it to the FinOps practitioner, to get to know what an ITAM practitioner does. And then building on that, we actually took, you've seen even mentioned today that we have, FinOps and other intersecting capabilities, and ITAM/SAM is one of those. And so we actually took that capabilities page and did a bunch of work to update and add to that page. And we did that across various activities and maturity levels, which I'll sort of talk about. Just to sort of start out here, we have several working group members from the ITAM community, of which we have several from Anglepoint. We borrowed this image from them because it really does show a good overview of IT financial management and sort of all the pieces and parts of that, and how FinOps sort of overlaps with many of them. And so this is a really good a way to look at, even how we can intersect further here, and why we feel that FinOps and ITAM should work together. It's certainly a popular topic nowadays, and we've been having some very interesting conversations. You can go to the next slide. Yep. Okay. So first of all, and this is available. There'll be links in the chat here. So we have developed this ITAM persona, and we wanted to do that so that we can really introduce you to what an ITAM practitioner does, what their roles and responsibilities look like, and really kind of what overlap we have with FinOps. And it really not only highlights, licensing information that the ITAM practitioners have, but also the relationships that they have both with internal stakeholders and external, especially with vendors. So those are relationships that maybe we don't typically have access to. And then we also, combining what ITAM is doing for lifecycle asset planning and what FinOps is doing with onboarding, if we can get together in the beginning and really work together, we can further drive cost optimization and governance and efficiency better together. If we're teaming up in the beginning, and then we're also highlighting as part of this persona some of the challenges that ITAM has, especially in the cloud environment. And really, if you take a look at that, it does show that the FinOps practitioner does have some of the visibility that's needed, and so that there's sort of a natural partnership between us, where we in the group we're calling them blind spots. We each have some blind spots, and we can actually help each other through those blind spots. So the other deliverable we had was adding to and improving the capability page. And I just wanted to sort of highlight some of the key takeaways we had here. The graphic that we created was really just talking about maturity and where you are at the beginning of the process when both FinOps and ITAM are working separately. We both have our individual understanding around our resources, our tagging strategies, what goals we have, and what frameworks we use. And we're sort of operating in a silo, and where we really want to get into that next level is more about understanding what each other is doing. How are workloads coming in? How are we talking about that at the beginning? With a heavy emphasis on knowing what's out there, what type of licensing maybe do you have on-prem that we can leverage in the cloud, really have a shared understanding around the contracts and the discounts, and what kind of decision-making there is in that process. And, maybe getting to a place where we have some more common goals. And then, ultimately, we'd like to end up, being able to get to a place where we have between us shared and consistent processes, so that people know when they're coming into an environment that, they're thinking about, their resources and what they cost, but they're also thinking about the licensing and what do we have out there that exists that we can leverage, or is there a better way to procure it to get even more of a discount, so that we have, that common shared standardized process that we can, that people can leverage. And, that might include a common tool set. Obviously we have different sets of tools, but, these are the types of things that this group is sort of outlining. As far as key takeaways, we're highlighting, the complexity that cloud is bringing with managing licensing, especially because of the ephemeral nature and the rapid create and delete of resources, and how that, how licensing is affected by that. And the other thing we're highlighting is that, both groups have specialized knowledge, and that specialized knowledge we can really benefit from by working together. And, that I think is, what we're finding out in our work group is that we do have a lot of synergies and a lot of places where we can help each other just get visibility in places where we just haven't been because, we've been working in silos. Next slide. So that was, those were our deliverables for sprint 1. And we are currently about midway through our second sprint. What we're working on now is we're sort of outlining or creating a matrix of sorts to show how ITAM and FinOps overlap as they are aligned in all of the FinOps capabilities, and maybe not how they overlap today, but where we think they should overlap and where we should partner. And so that's kind of where we're what we're collaborating on now, and that will be part of our Sprint 2 deliverable. And then going forward, we're also going to be looking at developing some outputs around, better understanding entitlement quantities and use rights and allocation. Maybe come up with some best practices and strategies around SaaS applications. There's a lot of buzz about that, and there's a lot more complexities around some of those SaaS applications. We also do have, if you have an interest in this area, we have a special interest group. There's a Slack channel there. Personally, this is where I came many months ago to ask some questions, and I landed myself in the working group, and I'm learning a ton. So, if you have interest in this area, certainly come join us in the Slack channel for the special interest group. And this is our set of Sprint 1 contributors. We have a really great group of people here from both ITAM and FinOps practitioners here. So big thanks to all of our contributors for hours and hours of work and sharing all of their knowledge. It's definitely been a really great learning opportunity.
I'm the staff liaison for this, and I come, and most of the time I'm just so adept in listening to your guys' conversation. It's really great. So thank you all.
Next up, we have Bindu from Sustainability Working Group.
Thank you, Samantha. Hello, everyone. I want to talk briefly about our cloud sustainability, what we have achieved so far, and begin with the introduction. The cloud sustainability is very closely related with the FinOps, as both focuses on the efficiency in the cloud. In FinOps, we measure that efficiency through cost by making money in the cloud, and in cloud sustainability, we focus on making the environment sustainable for us by reducing the carbon emission, by controlling the water and electricity that we use in our data centers, and also the depletion of our metals and minerals. While we understand the terminology like cloud sustainability and green ops is still not decided or standardized. But one thing is what we have noticed is one thing is clear, that the cloud sustainability is has the intersecting capability with FinOps, as both are saving the operational cost of the cloud. As part of the deliverables of our working group, what we have done as part of Sprint 1 and 2 is completed the understanding of the sustainability, creating the glossary of terms and some remediation examples, that how do those remediation steps of FinOps contribute towards the carbon emission control automatically. And that's when I say they have the intersecting capabilities. So if you have the established FinOps culture in your organization and best practices, you are somehow already contributing towards reducing the carbon emissions. As part of Sprint 3, we came up with the set of actually one-statement questionnaires. Just 15 questions are there. And we are calling it self-assessment. You read the question, answer it yes or no. And if you do not know, you answer it do not know. And then there are also sections for each of these questions to get the detailed understanding why we are asking this question and what problem you'll be solving. And you can click on those links and then get the deeper understanding on what is that question is about. The format of that assessment is Google Sheet or an Excel spreadsheet. You just answer yes or no, and the next column to it is just the more information section. Who is it is targeted to? It is targeted towards the FinOps practitioner in an organization, or an individual engineer, because we know one of the driver of sustainability in an organization are the individual engineers or contributors who are passionate about sustainability, and they want to sometimes they want to even measure of their workloads how much carbon emission it's emitting when they run their workload or resources in the cloud. And also, as a whole, with the engineering leadership or the cloud sustainability engineer itself, if you have a mature practice, you might have an SME of sustainability, and they want to set up some KPIs, set up the standards across their organization to measure your sustainability and set up the sustainability goals. As mentioned here, the snapshot, the one single statement questionnaire, and assessing your, and once you assess your sustainability goals, and based on how mature you are in your practice, you can set up the upcoming goals for an organization, or even kickstart the sustainability. Having said that, let me just quickly walk you through one quick example of the question, and I think it's question number 5 here. Can you or your organization articulate the basics of how software contributes to global warming? If we look at this question, we are all familiar as a FinOps practitioner that when we run a software, we are using compute, storage, networking, and those kind of cloud resources. And the way it is classified is that these kind of carbon emission is called embodied carbon. And on top of, and these all, the whole software is running on an equipment, which is sitting in a data center on a rack. The cooling system is running, the water is utilized, and all those things are actually contribute towards the supply chain of the whole carbon emission that is being used, and it's called embodied carbon. The other carbon emission that being used is called the operational carbon, which is the electricity that is being utilized by that data center. And the way the electricity is created, it is converted and then distributed, that is also emitting some level of carbon across the atmosphere. And both of these type of carbons are calculated through carbon dioxide equivalent in formulas. So we notice that as a FinOps practitioner, we have insights into how much carbon being used when we through our cloud console, but it has an upstream or downstream of utilization of carbon emission. So you will notice when you click on the more information, you'll get all these details in case you need the understanding of this particular question. And then you can also go deeper if you already have the understanding of these scope 2, scope 3. If you want to go deeper and establish more better best practices and such, you'll get to the links for the reference. In this case, it's like Green Software Foundation, which gives the best practices around understanding, calculating, and setting up benchmarks and KPIs. So that's the format of our self-assessment. Again, you download it. We are not collecting any data of your assessment. You download it, take the self-assessment, set up as a benchmark, and monitor your progress. Regularly monitor it, maybe twice a year, 4 times a year, and see how your sustainability journey is progressing. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have all the information on the left table in terms of going deeper into your understanding of your assessment. And when you take the assessment, what are the takeaways would be is the intersection, and I'm sure, and we have already actually published the intersection paper in the foundation, so you can add it to your reading list. And also, in case the sustainability practice is not established, you can come up and discover the initial steps and monitor your progress of the sustainability across your organization. Next one, please, Samantha. What's upcoming? Once we, as part of 1, 2, and 3, we had defined sustainability. We have glossary of terms, which are widely used, and the standardized term for the sustainability area. And after you have taken this self-assessment, what we are thinking in upcoming sprint is to set up the framework or the persona, setting up some KPIs, understanding different laws. There are different established laws around Europe, and there are also some in USA. So we're getting all the framework ready according to the laws that are there, according to the persona that we will define. And it is going to be more type research kind of project for our working group. And we will identify any advanced KPIs or metrics that can be used where we can show the intersection between FinOps and sustainability. As mentioned in the second paragraph, how to get involved, there is a discussion forum of chat sustainability and also a working group. And you can welcome to join, and we are looking forward to your contribution. This is the awesome roster of our working group. They are all coming from different areas and, you know, either established community, established members, or some are kicking off the practice in their organization. And again, I would like to mention, please join our group and contribute.
Thank you, Bindu. And up next, we have Gordon from the Internships Working Group.
Great. Thank you very much, Samantha. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Gordon Douglas, and I'm part of the Internship Working Group. To tell you a little bit about the Internship Working Group, one of our objectives was to provide an outline and definition of best practices for onboarding interns to make the interns productive team members as soon as possible. We also had an objective to help answer the question of why and how we believe the FinOps Foundation and its practitioners would benefit from the working group output. To meet these objectives, we conducted an internal FinOps Foundation and external survey from internal referrals. The surveys were meant as a feeder system in which to provide information and data to help fuel real-world examples and sample projects. These examples and sample projects could then be tailored to career goals of the intern and for a hiring organization. As shown here, some of the data we were extracting from the surveys were things such like the value of internships, the onboarding strategies, and the project opportunities. This brings me to one other point I need to stress. This wasn't a one-sided view, meaning that this wasn't just focused towards just internships or organizations. It was to be inclusive of both parties. That way, we had a holistic view of how interns and organizations can leverage this surveys and research that we did. Next slide, please. So the survey data and the interviews we obtained helped us paint a picture of the why. So the interns' motivations are limitless. Learning about cloud FinOps, which has numerous opportunities to obtain real-world experience in cloud, and the intern may be interested in or are determining if that's something they're interested in. Additionally, the intern may be in an internship that provides some pay, obtain some certifications, or in such cases be provided the opportunity of being brought on as a full-time employee. For organizations, the why is ultimately staff augmentation. The internship provides a potential untapped talent pool that provides unbiased opinions that are allowed to focus on specific projects without the normal day-to-day that a lot of these full-time employees have. The intern can also lend a hand with short-term FinOps activities for organizations, while the full-time employees in some cases Full-time employees are focused on longer-term company initiatives, In some cases, the internship is making a substantial impact for organizations, where organizations can use internships as a means to determine the fit of an individual as a future full-time employee. Lastly, from a financial perspective, internship programs are typically far less expensive than bringing on a contractor for a short period of time. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Sprint 1 survey results were beneficial for understanding what interns and organizations are doing. So overall, the surveyed interns were looking to fill requirements for degrees, obtain real-world experience, obtain an introduction to the world of FinOps, and also to potentially begin their career in cloud IT. For organizations that have onboarded interns, it was determined that the interns work best with a formal, defined program with formal mentors to provide guidance and information on a regular basis. The interns' backgrounds that were brought on in various organizations were very diverse. Some internship programs requirements were for accounting, engineering, DevOps, SecOps, cloud data analyst, and program management. While the picture is very bright, organizations need to be aware. Onboarding an intern can take time. You don't want just anybody to log into a console and be able to drive automation and start buying savings plans and committed use discounts and all of a sudden blow through a budget that wasn't planned. So have to be cautious and have some governance, and which is what this one's all about. However, with a mature and thought out process, bringing an intern on board can be done quickly and efficiently. This brings us to the next chapter. What's next? Next slide, please. So Sprint 2 is currently focused on a 10-step program of how to ramp up and onboard your intern. As I mentioned, it can be a tedious and time-consuming process. So Sprint 2 is going through a 10-step program on how to effectively and efficiently bring on and onboard, which covers details like learning and training objectives in various personas or areas, project introduction, intern feedback, and the final evaluation. Additionally, we've also been looking at the expansion of the internship projects and prototypes. As for a little viewing, the job board has internships posted on it. Next slide, please. One back, there you go. So the job board has numerous internships on it already. So please provide any references, point people in that direction to start looking at that. A lot of good stuff there. So, thank you. So with that said, huge thank you to the working group itself and all of the contributors and supporters. We couldn't have done any of this without you. And if there's any questions or you're interested in joining the working group, please join. Back to you.
Thanks, Gordon. I did just want to take a moment to recognize all the folks who presented today for working groups. So Amy, on behalf of our Under Armour and the ITAM working group, Bindu on behalf of the sustainability working group from Guidewire, and then Gordon, yourself from SAP. Your work, as well as all the contributions from the other working group members, is all volunteer time, and we very much appreciate your efforts here to sharing your knowledge and providing these assets to the community for use in their organization.
JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to FinOps.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.